I'm so excited to share with you this conversation that I had with Christina Goss. She is a veteran of the graphic design industry. She is an expert in branding and, fortunately for us, has agreed to be the instructor for our graphic communications portion of the Motion Maestro Motion Graphics Career Training Program, where we take very little experienced artists and we train them into working professionals for motion graphics. So this conversation, we were able to learn more about Christina, her experience. We're also learning about how she approached developing the curriculum for the course and just get some more insights into why she thinks that this is going to be an extremely valuable experience for those students that apply and are accepted. And I hope that you enjoy. Thanks for jumping on here and talking with us. And really, honestly, I'm grateful that you decided that you would be an instructor for Jumpstart, because I was really looking for somebody that had a lot of really positive experience that I do not have. And in the graphic design space, especially in packaging and print stuff, that's not really my forte at all. So I was really happy that somebody would be here that's got a lot of experience and that is willing to share that with the students.
No, I'm happy that I could help.
We've talked before about basically like how you got into design, but it's been a long time, right? Like, was it
Yeah,
15, 20?
I graduated in 2008. So I took a 4-year course. First is in an associate in communication design, and then my bachelor's in packaging and branding design. Um, and then I hit the ground running in 2008 working and haven't stopped since. So 2024 now, yeah, it's been a couple, almost 2 decades.
Wow. It feels like 2008 was not very long ago, but it was. It was, in fact, a decent amount of time. So obviously you like it, right? You enjoy doing design work.
I do enjoy it. I had a hard time actually picking what I wanted to do because I always loved art. As a kid, I took painting lessons since I was 6 years old. And then when I was in high school, I went to LaGuardia School of Art and Design. And so I took that opportunity to just try everything. I did book illustration because I wanted to do that. I wanted to do photography, did fashion illustration. I was trying to figure out what it is I wanted, but the thing is I liked so many different things. I took some graphic design. I didn't fall in love with it to begin with.
Hmm.
Um, it just seemed uh, the one that was easiest to get a job in,
Yeah.
with the minimal resources. And so there was a program that opened up in FIT, and that's what I ended up taking. But once I got in there, I actually realized that I loved branding because it covered my thirst for doing many different things.
Mm.
So it wasn't that I was just doing one thing in one field. It was that I could learn about so many different topics and different industries. And so by being a designer, your clients were just everywhere. And so that part of it is the part that I was excited about. And I think even today, like hand skills are still valuable in graphic design, even though you see a lot of it just being on the computer. There have been many times where my drawing and painting, just that training from back then, it still comes in handy nowadays. So I think that it all just put it all together.
I feel the same way. Curiosity is not something that you just are satisfied with one thing, right? You're constantly interested in many different things. And I love that being in design, in my case, motion design, when it comes to working with different clients, you have kind of this just incredible variety of different things that you have to learn in order to tell an effective story. And then understanding different businesses and different clients' needs, then you're kind of like you're almost thrust into that business to
It
tell
is.
that story. And that's really fun to me. I mean, because
It
I'm
is
never
me too.
satisfied.
Yeah, and usually my favorite projects are usually where the client is excited themselves, like they love what they're doing. So then the more I learn about what they're doing, then I'm excited too. And so that's been nice when I can share in projects like that. Like, yeah, you really jump into and want to know everything about their brand.
Well, so what's something like if you can share? I know we had briefly talked about you know, you are bound by NDAs, but um if you have anything, what was like a project that you really enjoyed that you can talk about?
One that I learned a lot on and was very different for me, like we've been talking, I do a lot of food packaging, but what I started working for as a consultant for Casper, mattress and bed company. And so that was something that was totally different. It's home goods. It was also e-commerce and
Mhm.
e-commerce that was becoming retail. And so, yeah, so it was nice to like see that transition. I actually learned a lot about e-commerce. They have a huge UX department as well. And so just learning tips from them, you just learn from everybody else. And so it was a really exciting project and to see how clearly design is catered for very different fields. Like when you're selling directly from your website, it's one form of communication. But then when you're in a store competing against other brands where you need to stand out, it's a totally different form of communication. And so helping solve those problems and use my experience for that was a neat project as well.
Interesting. Yeah, that's true. I like to think about that because many people they say like, oh, the first thing you think of as a if you're a designer is you think of the stuff that you make, right? The visuals that you put in whatever it is that you're making. But you're right, it's much more of a principled approach when it comes to just communication in general. You are communicating something with what visually you put together. And that's definitely the way it is for motion designers. We've been working almost for a year on this class at this point. How did you go about creating your curriculum?
When I was looking at it, I was thinking about the basic principles of graphic design. And I think part of it coming from an artist background, thinking of it as tools and then a technique and then the whole process, the creative process. And so that's kind of how I broke it down. I know the students will be familiar with the program, but the specific tools that we use in every project, like type, color, shape, they have certain principles behind them. And so exploring those to start with in the lessons, I think, are important. So you get familiar with what are the pieces. And then the next part is like the technique, how a skilled craftsman uses them. Um, and so starting to layer on those pieces and then bringing it all together now that you know the tools and the technique into the creative process, like where it fits from just being an idea you want to communicate to how you visualize that, how you make different versions of that, and how do you have a final product when do you know you're done. And
Right.
so I think all of that, was kind of like helping me filter it. I've also had a lot of, like I said, lessons I've learned from other people. And I try to incorporate that of how, there isn't a right way of doing things. This is my way of doing things, but I also want to teach it as a principle that you can take and you can do it your own way. But as long as you know the basics, you can figure out what works best for you or your project.
So at this point, I think in the class, your module is module number 3. So students would have some basic understanding of Photoshop, Illustrator, and After Effects. Tell us about the development of the skills and the tools that the students are going to use and learn in the class.
I'm thinking of the tools of, as like I said, the components of a design, not so much the programs themselves. Like I said, they will have be using Illustrator and Photoshop, possibly a little bit of InDesign, but this is more about just looking at these pieces that you've seen for a long time. Everyone knows color. Everyone knows, basic shape. You learn this in kindergarten. But looking at it through the eyes of a designer, what are they seeing? What was the purpose? One of the main things I start my lesson with is this idea that design and art are different. What's the lesson I learned at the beginning of my design career too, that art is for yourself and design is for someone else. Design is very goal driven. And so having these goals map out how you use these tools, I think, is a different way of thinking and approaching and using things. It's not just what looks good, but you actually have a plan. How do you form that plan? And so trying to map that out for someone. A lot of design looks effortless, but it's because someone put a lot of thought into that. And so it's that building that thinking and how you can approach that without getting that, not writer's block, but artist block of like, where do I go from here? Or why does the client not like it? It's trying to instead have a plan that answers what you need to do before you even get there. And so looking at these tools from that side and using these tools on these guidelines, I think, is what's going to help with those techniques. So for example, color, but like how color theory affects things and how different values next to each other will help something stand out or recede or clash, or how your eye movement shows where you're going to put something in a layout. And with layout, we're going to learn a lot about grids, which everything uses in a way to map everything out. You don't notice them. They're kind of the framework, which is what I'm trying to build here. It's this design thinking framework that you can lay all these pieces on, and that will help you through your projects. And a lot of it is like I said, principles, because they're not rules, they're not set in stone. And a lot of times there'll be a project and sometimes they'll be like, well, this doesn't apply here, so you don't have to use it. Or sometimes breaking the rules is what's going to help you stand out, because everyone is doing the exact same thing and sticking to the rules really closely. So I think once you learn all this thinking, it helps you to navigate that graphic design process, and especially to set the expectations of when people hire you of what kind of thinking they're expecting, because they're hiring you to solve this problem that they couldn't themselves. So you need to know how to solve the problem. So it's not just about the execution, but just figuring this out, or else somebody else could do it.
That is something that really like resonates with me, because most of the clients that I end up having as like repeat clients, they come back, because you're capable, you can do the work that they need done, but then also you've demonstrated that you can solve the problems that are presented to you, and having a kind of a systematic way to identify and create solutions for the clients in all aspects. My clients are video, it's almost always a linear video that has to be produced, but those challenges are the same at that principled level. My goal with this course is to provide students with a way to have all of the things that I didn't have when I started learning this, on my own. And if we can create a place where people are able to identify in all these different aspects of design how to solve problems, then they'll be equipped to do that whenever they're faced with whatever design problem that they have to solve in the future. What kind of projects are they going to complete as they go through this?
I try to give them some options in each lesson. You'll focus on the principle we learned in that lesson. For example, the first one is hierarchy, but your options will be for different industries. Because even as a designer working, like I said, for almost 20 years, I realized there are certain industries that I like better and that I'm more naturally talented at than others that I can understand and interpret better. And so I want the students to use this time to figure that out for themselves, know what their strengths are, That doesn't mean you can't work on your weaknesses, but it helps to know what your strengths are when you're first starting and looking for jobs. And so that's what these assignments hopefully will help them see. So, for example, they'll have postcard invitations or emails that you can design, but it can be for something foodie, it can be for a personal care line. I also wanted to make real world examples. So, like in like color, you can do like merch. A lot of different companies are doing merch now. A lot of color theory goes into that because it's fashion, but also, it's branding. There's also a little bit of like creating newsletters and recipes. I also wanted to do a little bit of wayfinding. A lot of companies just need signage. Sometimes you never knew this was a job. It could be national park signage, it could be a building signage, it could be a special event signage. And so starting to create those real applications, even doing like a truck decal, and how do you do something that's so massive? Like what are the specs on that? But all of those will apply the lessons that we've been learning, but trying to give them different options of different styles that they can go for and have fun with.
Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really excited to see what they create and how they finish up the class too. So you also have like a final project, right? That they are doing something related to their own brand, if I understand that correct.
Yes. So for the final project, I wanted them to take everything that they've learned together and to create a poster. We were going to talk a little bit about the history of band posters and how, they represent a lot of it, is an independent artist. And so that's what we are at this point. And so I wanted them to brand themselves and create a poster for themselves, using the different graphic design principles, and so that they can tell their own story. And then with that, using those same principles and translate it to a business card. So this starts thinking about branding principles. How do you extend and keep that cohesive look and style and communication, but for a whole other audience or substrate?
Interesting. Yeah, that'll be good because a lot of the final projects, they all end up being something that can be used for the portfolio, especially in the second half of the program where we start focusing on trying to get the students real work experience. So having these portfolio pieces or something that they can identify that is related to them as an artist, as a designer, is going to be important for them to be able to go get work, you know?
Yeah.
You've been working kind of as a freelancer, as a freelance designer for many years. Talk about what that's like. Like, what is it like to be a freelance designer? And what are some of the challenges that you've, had to overcome? What are some things that you would kind of warn somebody about or encourage, or the positive things? How can somebody be a successful freelancer if that's the route that they want to take?
Yeah, I love doing freelancing. It honestly gives me the schedule that I always wanted, but it does have its ups and downs. Part of the downs is that you don't have a dependable work schedule, in the sense that I might know what I'm working on this week and next week, even maybe this month, but probably not next month. And sometimes that can be a little scary, especially if other people depend on you, not just yourself. And so I think that trusting that sometimes can be very hard, but the ups have meant that I can set my own hours, I can work from home, I can make more time for things that are more important to me. I love doing work, but it really is just a means to an end. And so I have found also clients that respect that as well. That part has been really nice, that sometimes when I was working at a full-time job, which I did for like 5 years, I had to fight for that constantly, even though it was in my contract. And so not having to fight for that and being, my own company and working for myself has been very nice. I did 2 stints of freelancing actually. One for almost 3 years when I just got out of college, and then now, which I've been 9 years. And both were very different because one is like you're fresh from schooling and no experience. That one I'll speak to is I got paid very little. because I had no idea what I was supposed to get paid.
Yeah.
I had thankfully people in the industry that pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I don't think you're getting paid enough." So that helped me like ask for more. And when I asked for more, they were like, "Okay." I didn't get any pushback on it, which meant yeah, I wasn't getting paid enough.
Yeah.
And then I think what was hard as a freelancer, I worked with a couple different companies, and at the beginning it was hard to learn how each company has its own way of working. Each client has its own expectations, and everyone, just like any human, has different personalities. And so constantly readjusting to that took a little practice, but you get good at it. And then it's actually nice because you're like, oh, I can work with anyone. I also learned to ask more questions because at the beginning, I felt like I was expected to just know everything and to know how to do things. And if someone asked me to do it, I should know how to do it. But sometimes you just don't, and you just don't have the experience. And so, yes, Google helps a lot, but I also asked a lot of people. And even if I just saw someone do something, I'd be like, how did you do that? Like, just to learn some more because people have different ways of doing the same thing.
Uh,
So I learned a lot that way. I remember some hard times, like one of my first tasks, someone asked me to do bubbles. And I was like, and make it a realistic bubble. And this was early Photoshop years. And I was like, I have I did it. And they were like, this isn't good enough. And then like they did it in like 5 minutes because they had experience. They had like
yeah.
7 years more experience than me.
Right.
And so sometimes that happens. You're just not quick enough, and you just need time to keep polishing those skills and keep improving, keep practicing. Something that I did know was important then and is even more important now for me in freelancing is don't burn any bridges. Uh, Even if you don't like the job, it's okay. You're going to move on to the next one. Be nice about it, be friendly about it, be professional about it, do the task, and that's okay if you part ways at the end of the project. But it happens. Just like some personalities don't work with you, there will be some projects and clients that might not work, but it it's been important because word of mouth spreads. And so I've had so many times where people I worked at one company then move on to other companies. And it's not that the one company talk to the other, it's that the people move around. And I've had that recommend me to different projects and new projects and more business. And I've heard of people that burned their bridges because the client says, "Oh, I don't want to hire that person. I worked with that person at that other company, and XYZ, like they did this, and so we're not hiring that person. We're not even considering it."
That's
And
so
so
true.
that's, I think, very important. Like I've even had like times where it's been a little stressful of just certain demands, and I did set clear boundaries, especially about my time. From the beginning, very respectful, but from the beginning, I set clear boundaries of like, I don't work weekends. Overtime was usually an exception, not a rule. But I remember there was this one difficult client, and I really didn't want to finish the project. I did not want to continue working. They were just very picky. And you'll find this, and I think this is a trick of designers, and this is where the design thinking comes in. As designers, we are visually interpreting the words someone is saying. They don't have a visual. And so some people can imagine it, but some people can't. So this person couldn't visualize what they were saying. And so whenever I provided a solution, they're like, that's not it. Like they just had to see it. Then they couldn't explain why that wasn't it. And so I had to make so many iterations of the same thing because they just couldn't explain what they were looking for.
Right.
And
Yeah,
this,
that's super common. It's very common to have somebody that wants something, but they do not understand how to describe it. And if they do have a way of describing it, it's not always actually what they really want. So sometimes we have to go beyond that and figure out what they actually need versus what they might be saying in that way.
exactly. And that was that was, I think, my most intense training of that. And I did figure out what she needed. Um, so I ended up being the only person left that was working with this person. But I realized part of it is that this project was so important to this person. So if I treated it with the same importance and respect and even outlined all my thinking and all the details that went in it, that I didn't just make it look good, that actually I really, really thought about this, I actually earned this person's respect more. And they started to respect my opinion and what I was showing because I could explain all the thinking. Because of that, I actually got recommended to another client because they were like, this person is so easy to work with. And so I got transferred from this client to another client, and this other client was very easy to work with. So
Yeah, yeah.
so between the two of us, yeah,
It's amazing.
it's amazing how sometimes, you get that reputation freelance
Recommendations are
for.
huge. They're
Yeah.
huge. And I totally agree. There have been numerous examples in my working career where, because I didn't burn bridges almost a, decade later, people call you because they've got something new going on, and they remembered that you did this thing, and that's kind of the overall idea. And then based on that one connection that you had, it ends up, spawning something totally different and really beneficial to you at that time. So yeah, I can absolutely see. There's a lesson I read in a book by Joey Kornman. He's the founder of School of Motion, and he wrote this book called The Freelance Manifesto. And he described this time where this studio hired him as a freelancer. He went in and he worked, I forget how much it was, but they never paid him after the project was complete. And I think they kept having issues, and they never paid him. So then he wrote him a letter, and he was like, listen, you can pay me 80%, and we can call it, or I can get lawyers involved. He made a point with that lesson in that, because they paid him after that, they did end up paying him the 80% of the job. His lesson was basically that premium that he paid essentially in that job was the cost of learning that he didn't need to work with those people again.
Mm.
Instead of causing a big scene, dragging people through the mud, making it really difficult to work with you, or or even giving them an opportunity to say something negative about you as a designer, as a motion designer. It was, that's just the premium you paid to know you don't want to work with them again. And that to me is, maintaining a peaceful like attitude when it comes to work, and just being the person that solves the problem is worth more in the long run than, a few $1,000 that you might lose in some overtime. That's the way I've always treated it. And people, they like when you can solve a problem and be pleasant about working together.
It's
So
true. Yeah, even
absolutely.
like that makes me think of another lesson I've learned is that try not to say no when someone asks, "Can you do this?" Because even if you're like, "Oh, that's going to look terrible." Well, how would you make it look good then? That's your job. you know,
Yeah.
they might say make it all red and you're like, "Oh no." Like if you just say no, that then you're not going to get hired again. They'll find
Right.
someone else to make it red. But if you figure out a way to make it look good, now you got, so it really is about, okay, sometimes it might not be my personal preference, but it is my job to make it look good or solve the problem. So I try to figure out a way. There have even been times where someone asked me something specific. And like you said, it's that they don't know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And so they ask me to do this because they think help it. But if I figure out what they want, what I do is I'll do what they ask. But then I'm like, I think what you actually wanted is to make this more important. And so then I do that version as well. And I show them both versions. And a lot of the times they're like, yes, that's what I wanted. because by them asking for specific requests, it's not that I'm denying them. I'm asking, I will do it, but that is teaching me something that they're still looking for. And so I think it's important, like, even when you are like, oh, that's not going to work, to just think about it a little bit more, respond in a professional way. Like, what if we did this? Or do you think that this is more important? Or, show them options. Don't just slam the door.
Absolutely, yeah. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the client, they want some type of deliverable,
Yes.
but the value that we are actually going to bring as designers is visually solving that problem. So understanding and then solving it is what they actually need. And if we show them that we can provide value in our thinking, that's where they want you around. If anybody goes through the class, understanding that they're not just making pictures is important. They're trying to think to help the client, and that's ultimately what we want to do, especially as like people in Motion Maestro. They're going to be solving problems to tell a story visually and do that through motion and design. So awesome. All right, I have one more question, and then we'll tie it up. As a freelancer, in the beginning, it can be very difficult to find clients, as you probably found out early on when you were doing your stint of freelancing. Knowing what you know now, if you were to put yourself in the place of someone who finishes this class and has their portfolio ready to go and wants to start working for themselves, what would be the most important thing for them to build their network and show their capabilities to people and potential clients so that they can start building their freelance roster and, eventually, ultimately, where they can earn a living working for themselves?
I think a lot of it is humility, actually, because you are there to help them. They're paying you for a service. So I think keeping that in mind, and I remember like writing a lot of emails and responding to a lot of job requests of like, I'm here to help you, and even offering my services for a week or 2 weeks so that they can get to know me, get to know my style, see if we work together. I think keeping that really like humble attitude helped me get my foot in the door, because a lot of companies don't want to commit to a complete stranger, especially you're new from school. They're like, I don't know if they can do this. But by telling them, like, I just want to help you, whatever you need for these projects for a week, or 2 weeks, a month, then it kind of like let the pressure off of them so that they didn't have to commit. And then a lot of times I stayed on for several months because they're like, oh, this is working. And so I think that helps, like keeping that mindset of that you are there to help. I even have thought of myself, I am also there as like emergency services because they don't have enough staff. And so I am there in a pinch. They don't want you like taking your time and taking it easy. As a freelancer, you're there to hit the ground running.
You're like the hired assassin.
Exactly.
You're to do a job.
Yeah, just do it as, not as quick as possible, but like you get there, you immediately like ask for what you need. Can I get these tools? Can I get access to this? How do you do this? Like ask the questions right away. Show that eagerness that you're ready to work and jump in and help out. If you finish a project early, ask like, what else can I do? Like, I think all of that shows that you're ready to help them out. And so that helps a lot. And like I said, like those people will go to other companies and keep track of that. I follow people on LinkedIn that I work with, and then I follow them when they go to a different company. And then you can check if they need help in that other company. That always like, it just helps branch out your network. I know there's a couple of like expos and design shows and stuff like that. Sometimes you can visit those as well, just to visit different brands. Sometimes there's brands I feel really strongly with, like as a consumer. And I reach out to them as well and saying like, look, I love your brand. I love X, Y, and Z about your brand. Would you need any help in doing this? And you introduce yourself. I'm a junior designer. I do this and that. Showing that passion and that humility together will help you build that network.
Yeah, absolutely. And understanding it's a snowball, right? This was kind of going back to that thing about not burning bridges. If you work for 40 years, the people that you worked with in year one could be the people that you work with in year 5, 15, 20, 30. So it's understanding everybody kind of moves at the same, that everybody moves around in the same direction when it comes to working in design. So just being a positive person to work with and yeah, going out there and taking practical steps. Definitely. I think that's really good advice. Well, thank you so much, Christina. We are really excited to see your parts of the course in Motion Maestro in the graphics communication part.
Thank you for having me.